Hello and welcome to Kitchen Table Talks. My name is Toni Austin Allen and I am here with Dr. Roy Austin, author of Definitions for Living, a book dedicated to helping you live more effectively and happily, both personally and in your relationships with others. A number of years ago, Dr. Austin compiled numerous articles which he had written to assist his clients into what is now his book, Definitions for Living, making sense of words and ideas that define our lives. Recently, he and I began sitting at our kitchen table and talking about his book, and we became excited about the possibility of sharing our conversations with others who might benefit from them. The podcast you are about to listen to are the product of the recordings we began making of our conversations. We have discussed the book chapter by chapter and have produced this series of podcasts to accompany the printed version of the book, which is now available as an ebook on various publishing websites. Although we believe you will benefit greatly from the podcasts themselves, you will get the most out of them by purchasing the book, reading each chapter prior to listening to the podcast, and having it available to follow along with our conversations. The ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We hope you enjoy our talks at our kitchen table as much as we have, and that your life will be greatly enriched by having shared our conversations with us.
We are back with Chapter 4, and we are going to be talking about something that I've actually never discussed but have been involved with, and I've never seen anything about it. It's called How to Respond When You Are Not Believed. How did you come upon writing this little segment of the book?
Well, I had the same experience, Toni, of I had never read or heard of anything about this particular issue myself. And I had so many clients who had found themselves either by their own initiative or by someone else's initiative of having created a situation that we're going to be talking about now, and that is when you say something and someone else says, "I don't believe you," or something to that effect. And over time, I heard so many people, my clients, who had gotten into so many power struggles and conflicts with people over this issue. And in my studies and research and experience, I had never read anything about it myself either, so I decided to write an article about it, and it took several tries, as most of these articles did, of just piecing it together over a period of time until I got it the way it seems to work for me and my clients, and so I made it part of the book.
Well, I want to ask you, or actually make a statement, because you talk about whether we're lying or we're telling the truth, we tend to get really defensive either way, which is really interesting, actually.
Right.
We're trying to cover our steps, or we feel like our integrity is hurt. You know, how could you not believe me? And really, we just all are human, and we have so many different perceptions and past stories that we pick up on things differently, and sometimes we may choose to tell the truth or not the truth. Or so I'd like to let you read these 3, A, B, and C, of why we do this. Why, you know, if we're lying, why do we do that?
Absolutely. That's an important issue, and the first several paragraphs, as the reader will know, relate to this separate but clearly related issue of whether to tell the truth in the first place or to not tell the truth. And so that's really a conversation for another time and situation, which I don't go into a great deal of detail about. in this chapter, because this is about how to respond when we're not believed. But the issue of telling the truth or not telling the truth is extremely relevant, that I speak to it to begin with before I list the 5 steps to go through about responding. Oh, by the way, as we're getting started, the key word in here is respond rather than react. What you've just described is more of a knee-jerk reaction. Either feel shamed or angry or threatened, and get defensive or aggressive about it, or manipulative, or try to be nonchalant or uncaring about whether we're believed or not. And so that gets into a power struggle situation, which these 5 steps help prevent. So by respond, I mean really in a healthy, appropriate way, taking control of the conversation rather than getting embroiled in a power struggle related to not being believed, which is more of a reaction. And that is, the other person is basically in charge of where the conversation goes, and it often turns out to be destructive rather than constructive. So I wanted to clarify the importance of the word respond rather than react. But back to your question, I do mention here is that we are, first of all, responsible for deciding whether we're going to tell the truth to someone or not, the whole truth or partly truth or a shade of the truth or a white lie or a so-called black lie, whatever those might mean to you. So we do have to decide if in fact we are going to be truthful. And obviously using these 5 steps, when someone says, even though we're being truthful, well, that's just not something I believe. I think you're lying to me. And then it's a lot easier and more comfortable using these 5 steps if in fact we have been truthful. We're approaching it from that position of confidence that we know we're telling the truth, and we're just trying to help the relationship by seeing if there's something we can do to help the other person believe us. But sometimes, like most humans, we do not tell the truth for various reasons, and I have mentioned these 3 here. One is to protect ourselves or others from some unpleasant consequences of being truthful. Secondly, to deceive someone for our own personal benefit. Or thirdly, to create a situation in which someone else would be harmed. And so there are reasons for lying which could fall within any or all 3 of these categories. So we have to take into account if we do tell something that's not honest, we have to understand, hopefully have thought it through, and we can justify the lying to ourselves in what is known several decades ago in popular writers about situational ethics, and there was a lot of controversy about that. And so there are situations and circumstances in which one may choose to lie or not be totally honest, and if so, we have to take responsibility for that and understand that there are potential consequences to ourselves emotionally inside if we lie, or to the relationship if someone finds out that we have lied. Just as there are potential positive and negative consequences to having told the truth. Absolutists will say, the black and white thinkers may say, well, it is always good to be truthful in every situation, no matter what the cost. And you have a right to take that position, but you also have the responsibility of understanding that it may cause some very unpleasant or painful consequences to you or someone else if you're totally honest under all circumstances.
Yeah, and there are also And excuse all the sounds, listeners. The roof of the house is popping because it's heating up. So if you're hearing strange sounds, that's what it is. But there's also the idea of privacy and appropriateness, because sometimes we might be dealing with something and we're not ready to talk. So we may omit information, or we may say, I'm okay. When we know we're not, we can't, for me, I personally can't hide a lot of stuff. I just can't. I'm not good at it. I could if I tried harder. But somebody might realize I'm not okay, but I need a little time. Or maybe it is to protect myself from things I don't want to go into. Is there something wrong with that?
Well, here again, that depends on whether you're an absolutist or not.
Oh, I see.
If you're an absolutist, you would say the answer would be absolutely. Anytime you lie, it's wrong. Here again, there are consequences to that. Mm-hmm. Just like there are consequences to any time you tell the truth, you have to risk those consequences as well. So there's no easy answer to that, because that's an ethical question, which is outside really the limits of this short article.
And that has a lot to do with our belief system.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go on and deal with the matter at hand of, let's say I've told the truth, or at least some part of the truth, and there's another person, could be a business partner, it could be a relationship, and they don't believe me. The first thing you say is to express your regret at not being believed. That's really good. I usually am, by that point, pretty reactive, and I'm sure a lot of people are. You don't believe me? Well, then I can't talk to you.
That's a very common reaction.
Uh-huh.
Or what's wrong with you that you won't believe me?
How dare you? How dare you?
Right. Right. I'm reminded of these old cop shows that we used to watch on television a lot of times. They'd bring somebody in to be questioned, and the person would say, "Oh, but officer, no, I did not steal those jewels. You just got to believe me." And of course, the old standard response from the detective is, "No, ma'am, I really don't have to believe you." But that's when we get really, really reactive and defensive and saying, "How dare you not believe? You just got to believe me."
So this is the first step in responding. Is it right here?
Yeah, and Tony, there's a real basic principle all the way through these 5 steps, and that is sincerity and authenticity. We can't use these response steps flippantly or arrogantly, or in a sense of I don't really care, or go through it in a scripted way, as if it's memorized and you're reading it off a piece of paper inside your head. Like, for instance, when I say express your regret at not being believed, it's one thing to say, well, I'm sorry you don't believe me. Mm-hmm. Well, that's very flippant. And if you really care about the relationship, you have to be careful about those kind of flippant, off-the-cuff, defensive statements. That's not what I'm talking about here. If you care about the relationship and you want it to be a good quality relationship, either business or personal, it will be important to you that they believe you. And you will have an honest, sincere regret that they don't, because if they continue not to believe you, it could seriously endanger not only the quality of the relationship, but also the continuation of the relationship. So if you say, well, I'm sorry you don't believe me, or I don't really care whether you believe me or not, and if that was true, then you have to ask yourself, why am I in this relationship interacting with this person and telling this person something to begin with, if I don't care whether they believe me or not, or if I just flippantly say, well, sorry about that, then it sends the message, I don't really care about this relationship in the first place because I don't really care whether you believe me or not. Well, you're sending a double message there. Mm-hmm. And so if you really care about the relationship, you are going to be sincere in that sense of regret. And so you need to say something, I am so sorry that you don't believe me because that's really important to me, or I wouldn't be in this relationship with you in the first place. So I'd like to talk with you about it and see if we can clear the air here. Mm-hmm. And help you to believe me because that's important to me. But you have to mean it. You have to be sincere about that, because if you're not sincere about it, it's going to come across to the other person as a mixed message.
Yeah, and I like these words. You say, I value you as my friend or business associate, and I'm concerned that you think I'm not being truthful. It might hurt our relationship if we don't clear this up. That is steering the conversation.
That's taking control of it in a very healthy way.
Yeah, I mean, you have said some really good things. I value you. I'm concerned. This might hurt our relationship. Not you are hurting our relationship, but this might. So that's getting the other person to think through their part as well. I like that.
It pulls them into the conversation and tells them that you want them to be a part of the solution here, and that you're willing to cooperate with them. And here again, if you're not being truthful about that concern, if you're lying about that, you shouldn't be in the relationship in the first place. The relationship is based on a false foundation to begin with, and it's not going to go anywhere good. So you need to be able to say this and mean it, and because the sincerity or the lack of it will come across in your conversation with them.
Number 2, ask, can you tell me why you don't believe me?
Well,
and you have to be willing to listen at that point.
Yes, here again, that's telling the other person that you really want this problem to be solved, and you're willing to provide what information you can and is appropriate to help them believe you. You're not just saying, well, sorry you don't believe me, and you're just leaving them out of it. And so you have to be willing to pull them into it, to ask them to tell you what's the problem here.
It goes back to previous chapters, especially the most previous, the nonverbal communication, because sometimes we might not believe somebody because we're getting what we think is double messages. Mm-hmm. Sometimes nonverbal and words and tone of voice might not be matching, and we could start assuming that they're lying because of the mismatch.
Exactly. Like, for instance, I think we used an example there in that nonverbal communication. If someone says, you want to go to the movie tonight, and your answer may be, well, that'd be okay. Well, that's a confusing message.
You obviously don't really want to go. Are you calling me a liar? I can already see it.
Exactly, see? So we do not want to assume that another person is lying to us. They may be, but they may not be. They may be conflicted within themselves, or they may be having to think it through. So that's important to ask this question. It sounds like you don't believe me, but what leads you to say that? And they may explain to you, well, you said you want to go to the movie, but you didn't really sound all that interested in it. And then I could say, oh, well, yeah, I could see how that would be a problem. I really would like to go to the movie, but I've got some homework I've got to do tonight. So I was trying to think through how important it is for me to get this homework done. And I was just thinking it through, and I could see how that could be misleading. So sometimes that can clear up the confusion right there, is just say, why is it that you don't believe me? But here again, you say it gently and sincerely, instead of just coming out and bluntly and saying, well, why don't you believe me? You should. Well, that doesn't help the relationship. You have to be very, very committed to doing it gently and sincerely.
Absolutely. Number 3. This is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Ask, do you want to believe me? I would never have thought of asking that question. But by that point, you are kind of realizing you might be in a power struggle.
Or it may be a dead-end street that you don't even need to bother to go down. Because some people, they have their minds made up for whatever reasons that they're not going to believe you no matter what you say. And we have a lot going on in our political scene today related to that. In the conspiracy theorists and all of that, of saying, I really, no matter what you say, no matter what facts you give me, I'm not going to believe you. This is what I believe, and that's the end of it. And so it's really a lost ball game. So, but in a personal relationship that's not quite that extreme, it is important to say gently and sincerely, well, you're saying you don't believe me, but would you like to? Is this something that would be helpful if you were to be able to believe me? Because I'm willing to try to be helpful if I can here. So you ease your way into that question.
Boy, this question would be so helpful with so many issues that we're in a time in our history, at least in America, where we all have kind of divided sides on so many things. Religion, politics, lifestyles, beliefs, all kinds of things. And we don't talk to each other.
And because the answer to that question is, I don't want to believe anything you have to say because my mind is made up. And that is a crucial issue to confirm as gently as you can right up front. Because if that person's mind is made up, then you're left with saying, well, gosh, that's sad, that hurts, because that's going to affect our relationship, I'm afraid. But you're really not interested in believing me. Do I hear you correctly?
Or even being willing to listen.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to listen.
So that's a tough question to ask, but if you ease your way into it, it can produce some really good interaction.
So if they do say, yes, of course I want to believe you, then you can say, in number 4, what can I say or do that will help you believe me? And I recognize earlier when I was reading this, I paused at this one because I've often heard people say, what can I do to make you believe me?
Right.
But this is to help you believe me. Tell me the difference between those two.
Well, because you can't make anybody do anything. That's an illusion. That's a myth. And so you might as well just trash that word to begin with. And it's a softer approach to say, to help you believe me. That signals to them that you respect their right to believe you or not believe you. And you're not going to try to make them believe you against their will. The make means coercion.
Okay.
Even though sometimes we don't mean it when we use that word because it's just part of the colloquial language. But it's important for us to, here again, be disarming about the same thing. How can I make you believe me? That's very different from is there some way I can help you believe me? That leaves them in charge of the decision.
Yeah, I like what you say in the middle of the paragraph. All you are doing at this point is remaining cooperative. wanting to do what you can to provide whatever information or actions that might allow the other person to believe you. You're empowering them.
Yes.
To listen.
Yes.
To be open, to respond in return, and to possibly believe you.
And it's important to move to the next aspect of that particular point. Just because you're offering to do or say something that might help them believe you, that does not obligate you to say or do whatever they want you to say or do. Because it may be something that you cannot do or don't wish to do for your own personal value system, that they might say, well, yeah, if you were to do this or say this, then I would believe you. And you have to reserve the right of your own integrity of saying, well, that's something I can't do. Or that's something that just violates my value system, and I'm not willing to do it. That doesn't mean I'm lying to you or that I do not want you to believe me. It just means what you're asking me to do is something I'm not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. And then that leads to, if they choose, due to that, for whatever reason, they choose not to believe you, then you ask, where do we go from here? Whew.
And that's a tough one.
Uh-huh.
But here again, you have to respect their right to decide whether their not believing you is going to negatively impact the relationship. And they have a right to decide that. Mm-hmm. This might be an important enough issue for them to say all the way to the extreme of saying, well, I don't believe you about this particular matter, and because of that, I'm not willing to continue our relationship, and they just walk away from it. Mm-hmm. And you have to honor that. You have to respect their right to do that. But obviously, if you value the relationship, that's an extreme that you hope they will not go to. But it also respects their right to guide you in whatever direction they think is appropriate, because it's their circumstance of not believing. Now, I use the word circumstance advisedly rather than problem, because you don't want to say, well, it's your problem, or you think it's their problem that they don't believe me. It may not be a problem at all to them. Mm-hmm. It's their right and their choice. But it is their circumstance that they have created between the two of you that you have no control over. So you have to honor that and give them the right to decide, where do we go from here? And here again, you don't ask that question flippantly. Well, okay, so you don't believe me, where do we go from here? So you don't get hostile or angry or defensive about it. You just say, well, that really concerns me, and I don't know where we go from here. This concerns me here. Do we still have a relationship that we can enjoy together, or is this important enough that we can't continue the relationship? What's at stake here? Mm-hmm. And so you ask in that gentle, probing way and put it in their lap to decide literally where to from here.
And it says, stop trying to prove what you cannot prove. That is a really tough one. I'm one that can try to explain my way out of a refrigerator box if I'm tied up inside. Let me just explain, trying to prove. And I know from experience it doesn't help. Once they've made up their mind, it doesn't help. There's no point, because it's like you said earlier in the chapter, if I find myself or another person finds themselves trying to prove it, you kind of wonder, sometimes it makes you look like you really are lying, It's like you're protesting too much,
Yeah, I'm reminded of one of Shakespeare's play, mm-hmm. When someone had been killed, and there was a little aside conversation which another actor says, methinks he doth protest too much.
Yes, yes.
When he kept denying, I know I did not kill the king, I did not kill him, I did not kill him. Well, methinks he doth protest too much.
Yeah, and we don't have to be right. We don't have to prove our rightness.
No, we have to declare our truth or lie. Here again.
Yes, it's true.
we still have the option of lying or telling the truth. But when we say whatever it is we want them to believe, true or not true, and they say, well, I just don't believe you, then the harder you work at it and try to build your case, unless it's valuable information, but you've already been through that step. Is there any information I can provide you that will help you believe me? And if there's not, then you're wasting your time trying to prove what you cannot prove. You know, there is the old saying, you cannot prove a negative. Like a husband might say to his wife, well, you have to prove to me that you've never had an affair.
How can you do that?
You can't prove a negative. So here again, you just have to, in sincere sadness of saying, you're trying to get me to prove what I cannot prove. So I'm not going to go down that path. You just have to tell me where we go from here. So you kill that power struggle right away, not hostilely, but just sadly.
And again, it sounds like in the whole process, it really starts from the very beginning and making the choice to respond and not react.
Yes.
Because you cannot do any of this from a reactive state.
No, it's just
not possible.
Just a needless power struggle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will start chapter 5 next time, and you can believe me on that.
I do believe you, and I will look forward to it.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Again, Dr. Austin's ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We look forward to having you join us for our next podcast.